Welcome to the latest instalment of our investor presentation. Ireland begins 2020 in great shape from a funding perspective. We've run a budget surplus for the second straight year in a row. The NTMA has over 16 billion in cash on behalf of the Exchequer, and in the wider economy we're now pretty much at full employment with the unemployment rate below 5%. Of course, we do our contingency planning here in the NTMA, so we'll also look at some potential risks that may crystallise in 2020. First, to look at the US economy. So this time last year, plenty were concerned in the market about imminent US recession because the US yield curve had inverted or was just about to reach that point. And that means that short-term rates were about to go above long-term rates, which in the past has been a guide to US downturns. We do think though, even though we're big fans of the yield curve, that perhaps there are some reasons why it doesn't necessarily mean that there will be a recession in the year ahead. The first reason is that the inversion was pretty brief and you didn't see short-term rates go significantly above long-term rates, which you've seen in the past. Also, the shape of the yield curve was unusual at this point in the cycle. It was more U-shaped than downward sloping. And the key 2-year rate did not go above the 10-year rate. Of course, it's not just about those market signals, it's about what may happen in the economy too. And if you look at economic signals like jobless claims, which have continued to stay at low levels, and also the US leading indicator, a great guide in the past to recession, it has not gone negative, at least on a year-on-year basis. So perhaps the actions of the Federal Reserve has bought maybe a year to 18 months for this cycle. So that's the short term. There are though maybe some long-term threats to Ireland as we head into the new year. First relates to corporation tax, which we've discussed many times and produced some research on. If you look at corporation tax, it's now 13% of our total revenue, up from a 20-year average of 9%. In the short term, profit margins may be protected somewhat by what we've mentioned on the US economy. However, there could be some erosion of those profit margins as labour costs rise. But really, it's about long-term threats to business models, and perhaps most noticeably in the tech sector. So in the year ahead, there's discussion at an OECD and hence really a global level about corporate tax reform. That may throw up some risks to Ireland's model. And also, although it's early days, there's some stirrings about antitrust cases against US tech companies, both from Europe, maybe less so in America. And this would be to look at some of the more perhaps monopolistic activities of these companies. This video wouldn't be the same without a discussion about Brexit. Of course, over the last month we've had some respite, but this year it's really a race to the finish to get a trade deal done. We have to hope that if a deal is signed by the end of this year, it'll be one that will facilitate, to a large degree, goods trade. It's a little bit more complex on the services side, where Britain has said it wants to diverge from EU regulations. Of course, that creates opportunities for Irish companies that may, in the end, take some market share from their British counterparts in the European market. And we could see some relocation of companies that have a base in Britain into Ireland. But of course, for existing businesses, it may complicate their current business models, particularly Irish companies selling into the British market. So, in the end, it's a trade-off between the two. But if a deal isn't done, we have to hope that the transition period will be extended significantly beyond the end of this year. To sum up, Ireland enters 2020 in great shape. This was highlighted by the country being upgraded to AA towards the end of last year after a gap of almost a decade. There are some longer-term threats which we've discussed today, including corporate tax reform and, of course, the resolution to Brexit. We'll keep you posted about these through the year, but until then, Happy New Year.